right now. I currently, I'm a staff attorney at the Southern Coalition for Social Justice. We have a criminal justice arm of our work. We are a multidisciplinary organization that tries to serve as general counsel for the most vulnerable communities in North Carolina. And over the past 5 years, that's really manifested in 4 principal ways: voting rights protection, environmental justice, immigration, and criminal justice, because we find that those communities that are being racially gerrymandered at the General Assembly, that where they're trying to site a toxic landfill, are the same communities that are being disproportionately impacted by the criminal justice system. So we are a multi-issue organization. So that's the professional work I do. But I'm also have intimate experiences with the criminal justice system. I was incarcerated for a nonviolent drug crime from 1996 to 2000. Spent 40 months in prison. I consider myself a casualty of America's ill-conceived, immoral, and highly racialized war on drugs. And it was out of that experience that really propelled me to want to do this kind of work. I can remember very early on as a child, not necessarily feeling that the police were there to protect me. My dad was Dean of Veterinary Medicine at Tuskegee University. I mean, postgraduate person. And he had a restored 911 Porsche. And it was used, and it was something that, it was kind of his fixer-upper and his hobby, if you will. And we would take that car out on Saturday mornings to just go for a drive. My dad and his sons, me and my brother. And he would repeatedly get pulled over, time and time again, even though he was a Vietnam veteran, even though he had 3 different degrees and a DVM and as well as a doctorate degree. And he would repeatedly get pulled over time and time again, and I could see how angry it made him, because they felt that he was doing something illegal to be able to drive a car like that. And I can remember as a child looking at the side of a police car and seeing protect and serve, and never feeling that that meant for me, that applied to me. As I grew up and had more experiences as an African American male with law enforcement, those feelings became more and more calcified, as far as not necessarily feeling that they were there to protect me, but more that they were there to apprehend me. Once I got more involved in criminality, they were certainly there to apprehend me. And, you know, my incarceration experience certainly has left some real permanent impressions as far as the rehabilitative function as compared to the retributive function of our criminal justice system. I think we are much more retributive than rehabilitative.
You mentioned that the African American population is targeted. How so? How do you believe, like, for nonviolent, violent crimes?
Well, I mean, I kind of let the data speak for itself. I'm a student of systems theory, and when you look at systems, you look at the outcomes that they produce, and you let that tell the story rather than what folks' intentions are. So you can have race-neutral intentions, but if the outcomes produce highly racialized results, you have to look at that system and question whether it's intentional or unintentional, whether it's producing a set of results and what that set of results means for a particular community. So I think when I came and spoke to your class, I gave a real kind of, simple example. If everyone who went into Duke Hospital turned out dead, it would be very difficult to say that the hospital was a great hospital, because you would have to judge it by the results that it was producing, irrespective of the really expensive radiology equipment it had, irrespective of how journaled and peer-reviewed the particular doctors were on staff. The results of the hospital will be poor. So likewise, when you look at our criminal justice system and you see in the state of North Carolina 58% of the population being African American, where the general population is 21%. Nationally, you look at 13% of the African American population in the general population. And the federal prison population is upwards to 40–50% African American. When you look at those outcomes, it makes us question whether our system, our criminal justice system is operating in a very racially equitable way. So rather than say targeting, I would really demand that we have an outcome focus and try to remedy those inequitable outcomes.
Okay, do you think the public is aware of these injustices that are occurring?
Some, and some are not, and then some are willfully blind. I tend to aspire to people's better angels. I think most folks just really don't have a clue the scope and the reach of our current criminal justice system. I think a lot of folks have a misconception of who a criminal is. I think they think of serious violent criminals as being the majority of people who go through the system, and currently that just isn't the case. For example, in North Carolina, probably about 88% of the folks who go through the criminal justice system are for lower level nonviolent felonies and misdemeanors. A great deal of that percentage is traffic, because we treat traffic as a criminal offense in North Carolina. So those are the people who are clogging up our court systems. A very small percentage of folks actually commit really violent and heinous crimes. I think policing for a number of different reasons has changed, particularly in the last 30 or 40 years, where at one time a police officer was rewarded for doing really intensive police work, let's say wiretapping and surveillance and things of that nature that might take 4 or 5 months to land a big score, to land a big case. I don't think that work is rewarded nearly as much as racking up stats, racking up numbers, and that really doesn't get at the root of the problem, particularly when we're talking about drugs, and it ends up sweeping up certain groups of folks and not maybe sweeping up other groups. So I think it's unavoidable to look at our racial history and race and the role that it plays in our society. I'll give you a perfect example. Post-World War II, GIs coming back home, the federal government saw all of these men coming back home and said, we have to do something to make sure that they're employable, to make sure that they're housable. So we enacted the GI Bill. The Federal Housing Authority kicked off a big campaign to make sure that more Americans became homeowners. That was done via public policy, because we saw this particular population as potentially being vulnerable, as not being able to be mainstream consumers in our economy. Right now, African American male baby born today has a 1 in 3 chance of being in contact with the criminal justice system. I would dare say if the complexion was different, if it was 1 in 3 white males, we might be doing something a little bit different. This might rise to the level of being a national agenda item for us to figure out what to do about it. So I certainly think, the racial composition of who these really harmful criminal justice outcomes are happening to plays a part. Another significant part is that this unrelenting, tough on crime kind of mentality that has really permeated our criminal justice kind of vernacular over the past 30 or 40 years is just really difficult to break. No one wins elections saying that, I'm really about rehabilitation. People win elections because they say, I want to give more time, I want to hand out tougher sentences, things of that nature. So that pendulum is starting to shift. One of the unintended consequences of our economic downturn is that we're broke and we can't afford our current policy scheme. So we're starting to think about doing stuff differently. So hopefully there's a little bit of hope on the horizon.
How do you think the criminal justice system should be changed?
I think we need a more of a restorative justice, rehabilitative kind of component to our criminal justice system. Look, 95% of the people who go through our criminal justice system are going to get out of prison. They're coming back. We can either try to set those people up in the most successful, try to levy a sanction, punish them for what they did, while at the same time set them up to be successful. And our borrow a public health kind of paradigm. If you were to leave here today and go outside and trip and tear your rotator cuff, You would go to the emergency room. They would develop a treatment plan, a surgery plan, and a discharge plan within 2 days. You know why? Because they know they can't keep you forever, and they want to get you out of that system as soon as possible. That surgeon would develop a treatment protocol that not only is going to address the immediate harm, but it's going to make sure that you have the ability to serve a tennis ball again, so you can be fully functioning as much as possible. Our criminal justice system has to operate the same way. We cannot keep folks forever, so we need to levy sanctions to address the immediate harm, while at the same time give programs and address the underlying issues that brought them in contact with the criminal justice system in the first place, so that person can be fully functioning when they return back to society, and so that we won't have to keep cycling people in and out of prison.
What policies are you currently focusing on to make these changes?
So I'm part, at the Southern Coalition for Social Justice, we're part of a broader coalition around North Carolina, the North Carolina Second Chance Alliance. And it's a coalition of service providers, advocacy organizations, directly affected people that are working towards better reentry outcomes. So probably since 2008, we've had a reform agenda that we've been taking to the General Assembly to improve the chances of people being successful when they leave prison and jail. That's through legislation, whether it's passing legislation that relieves the barriers that are triggered once someone is involved with the criminal justice system, whether it's advocating for better front-end reform like decriminalization of certain lower-level offenses to divert more people away from the criminal justice system. So those are the kind of policies that we're working on.
Some talk has come up about ban the box. Could you expand on that?
So for those who don't know, Ban the Box is a movement that was started in the Bay Area by All of Us Are None. All of Us Are None is a group of formerly incarcerated people who came up with this public policy proposal. And it's basically about fair hiring or giving people a fair chance. So the box is that place on employment applications, housing applications, educational applications that ask about criminal record history. Ban the Box is a movement that advocates removing that box from the initial application and delaying the criminal record check until later on in the process to make sure that people are evaluated on all of their life experiences and not just their contact with the criminal justice system.